Good morning again from Silicon Valley. This is Marco Marinucci with Minder Bridge. Today we're going to talk about the world of sustainability and the future of travel with a fantastic project. Its name is Aviation X, and with us we have the manager of Aviation X Lab, Amna Redha. Hi, Amna. Good morning.
Hi, Marco. Good morning, Marco.
Yeah, so this is a very interesting project that we wanted to cover also because it's led by industry, so it's not just a single company, and we thought that the overarching theme is particularly relevant these days, not just from the source and the beginning of the project, but also how the project is developing over time, and try to support an industry that is highly affected. Everybody, here in our audience has some connection with. That is aviation and travel in general, and then the during and the post and hopefully post-COVID setup. So, Amna, a little background about yourself, maybe just to introduce your job.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Marco. Thank you for having me again. So my name is Amna. I manage the Aviation X Lab. My entire career has always been in aviation. I've actually started initially out of Seattle with Boeing, spent a couple of years with them. I then moved to Emirates, and I'm part of the innovation department at Emirates, and that role transitioned me into the Aviation X Lab later on. Marco, do you want me to jump ahead and give a quick intro into Aviation X Lab as well?
I think this is the perfect time to do so.
Thank you. So the Aviation X Lab, and I'll tell it in a story because it does have a very beautiful story to it. So the Aviation X Lab is in partnership with Emirates Airline, Airbus, Collins Aerospace, GE, and Thales. And traditionally, when you hear these names together, it's always under a business setting to try and make a sale, always very business focused. But this is the first time in the entire industry where these five forces come together under a single roof to really think about what does the future of aviation look like. And there's no other perfect setting because you have the provider, you have the suppliers, you have the entertainment systems, you have all of them collaborating together. And really the whole vision behind the Aviation X Lab was, okay, the aviation industry is doing quite well, pre-COVID, of course, hopefully post-COVID as well. But what do we need to continuously do to make sure that we're updated, that we're part of the progress, that we're part of the innovation team going forward? So that really was the whole vision behind the Aviation X Lab.
And so you started, I think the ideas and the first conversation started in 2017, if I remember correctly, yes. But then the first real beginning was a couple of years later, right before COVID, and obviously, the world around you, it changed dramatically. Before going there, so why these specific partners, and were they already collaborating in some sort of a mission, or it just were united by the vision behind Aviation X?
Absolutely. So the partners were always, collaborating and uniting, as I mentioned, on a different front when it comes to sales and airplanes and so on. But the whole purpose behind the Aviation X Lab and how it really started is, again, as you mentioned, in October 17, that's really when the seed was planted, I like to say. And we fall under an umbrella of Dubai Future Foundation, and mostly under Area 2071. And now what Area 2071 looks at is the next, the 100 years of the UAE. For those who are not familiar, the UAE, Dubai, was established in 1971. So 2071 is 100 years from that. And it's really looking at where do we stand as a country in terms of progress, in terms of, key industries? How do we ensure that we remain as successful as the last 10, 20 years have been? And that's where Air 2071 was launched. So obviously travel plays a big part in the UAE economy, a massive part. We rely quite heavily on tourism. Dubai is a business hub as well. So a lot of things are focused around travel. So that's really where we fell behind the vision of our leadership to really try to understand how can we ensure that what we create is sustainable, not only for today, but for the next 20, 30, 50 years. And that's when the Aviation X Lab was launched. Now, when Aviation X Lab was launched, what we really also wanted to look at is, we're not looking at solving, quick, week-based challenges. We were really looking at solving what we refer to as moonshots. Marco, I think you're very familiar with moonshots coming from a Google background, but for just everyone else, a quick overview. What a moonshot is, it's an impossible mission statement. And everything that we do is to try to turn that impossible into a possible outcome. So when Aviation X Lab was launched, we launched in October 2019 with two main moonshots. The first moonshot was the carbon negative aviation industry. Just saying that sounds impossible, right? Because obviously planes rely on fuel emits carbon. So how can you ever create a carbon negative aviation industry? And that's exactly what we wanted the world to help us solve, to look at innovations, perhaps through random thoughts, carbon offsetting, for instance, or electric planes, hybrid planes. But really the thought was really very futuristic innovations that are going to help us reach a carbon negative aviation industry. The second moonshot that we have is airport to airportals. And that's really looking at the transformation of the airport journey. Marco, I think you're very well traveled. And I don't want to even think of how many hours you would have spent just waiting in line to check in your bags, or at, border control, or the unnecessary queues that you sometimes see. And that's really what we wanted to also help solve, for a seamless airport journey, where what you imagine that you want your airport journey to look like, that's exactly what we want to be able to deliver. So these two were really the moonshots that we're looking for, Marco.
Amna, is the Airportal, what's your definition of Airportal? What your definition that you use inside? What's the vision of an Airportal?
So the name itself, an Airportal, was very interesting how we came about it. Because if you think of an airport, right, today, they're massive infrastructures, they're quite big, they require a lot of space, a lot of maintenance, a lot of costs also behind it. But when we were thinking of Airportal, right, so it's almost like, when you think of, the gas station, right, it's suited everywhere. You just go, you drop off your things, and then that also automatically transports you into your next destination. Of course, that's very futuristic, post 100 years thinking, but that's really what we wanted to look at. Because if you look at your airport journey today, there are a lot of things in between, whether that's checking in your bag, passport control, again, walking through duty free, getting to your terminal, if that's even within the same terminal that you checked in from. There's quite a lot of time that's wasted. So the perfect journey, I think, would be an extremely seamless one, where all of these different touch points that you have, are contactless touch points, zero wait time touch points, where it's almost you go straight from, your car or your home straight directly and into the plane. That would be obviously the ideal world that we're trying to solve for through the moonshot.
So a lot of thoughts there, again, from the main driver of the project, starting from the idea of moonshots that, as you said, is very, there's a lot of those in Silicon Valley. Yeah, we're used to see those in Silicon Valley. In fact, actually in Silicon Valley, there is a saying that you're always trying to aim to the moon. The worst that can happen is that you hit a star. And so at least you get a star as an option B. But I think is important to understand, the core also from the main driver of the whole project. You mentioned that from the Dubai Future Foundation, the fact that you're sitting also in a physical space is really the core of the nation, the era 2071. So give a little bit of a sense of why is that important for the nation itself.
Absolutely. I like to refer as Emirates Towers, which is where we're located physically in Dubai, as the innovation hub. And I'll explain why. So as I mentioned, we fall under Dubai Future Foundation, and Air 2071 is the umbrella as well under it. And the reason that this holds an extremely important factor when it comes to innovation is because they have a mandate to really look at technology, to really look at future innovations. They're continuously launching various projects. For example, Dubai Future Accelerators, which works directly with government entities to understand what are their challenges today and how can they really accelerate towards solving for these challenges using startups. Startups is a relatively new scene in the UAE. It's only been around the last couple of years. But today, that's completely shifted. Again, a big thanks to Dubai Future Foundation for that, because they've introduced startups to governments, and governments, as we historically know, take quite a lot of time processing, are used to working with, the giant companies. But in UAE, that's absolutely transforming because governments are relying quite heavily on the use of startups, on quick transactions, on really facilitating a lot of the things that customarily would take ages to process. To give you just a quick indication of why our space is also quite in the hub of innovation, as I like to say. We have the Youth Hub that sits right across of our office. The Youth Hub was the first youth ministry worldwide. We also have the Robotics Lab. We have the Ministry of Artificial Intelligence. We have the Ministry of Possibilities, which was a ministry that was launched specifically to deal with any impossible task. So let's say if you're a minister and you're dealing with something that sounds quite impossible, you go to the Ministry of Possibilities and they will facilitate a way, again, for that impossible to transform into a possible. So as you see, we have quite a fantastic range of different features right under our ecosystem that really facilitate and encourage that innovation process to take place.
That's fantastic. Just the idea of the Ministry of Possibilities, even just the name of it, I think is a driving force. So all of those are in the same building, in the same
all
tower.
of them under one single roof. Yep.
Yeah, that's, hypothetically speaking, but also physically under the same roof for real. So fantastic. And then that roof also is a roof for some of the corporates that you mentioned, the partners that are the sponsor of that project. So let's talk about how for these two major moonshots that you were describing, so airport to Airportals and the carbon negative shift. What was the initial process that you guys were envisioning in how do we filter potential projects? What's the roles of the corporates behind, and to what is the throughput? So what is the potential output? Again, that's before COVID-19, and then we talk about how that kind of shifted.
Absolutely. So before COVID, when we initially launched the moonshots, what we were looking for, again, are a range of solutions that can help us reach the moonshot. And we always knew it's not going to be one single solution that's going to transform the industry into being carbon negative, or one single solution that's going to, answer all of the airport challenges that we have. So when we launched, and we did it quite differently, we said, all right, we're looking for any solution that can help us reach that moonshot. And that solution can be today an idea. So, your researchers, your aviators, anything, and, a simple idea that they have, or it can be a more established startup or even companies. So we completely opened it to anyone that has anything that can potentially help us reach that moonshot. And the way that the Aviation X Lab works is that everything is digitized. So the whole application process sits on a portal, again, hosted by Dubai Future Foundation. And we had the applications open for a couple of months. And what we also have in Aviation X Lab is what we refer to as the Aviation X Lab Council. And the Aviation X Lab Council consists of a subject matter expert from each of the partners. And the reason that we wanted the subject matter experts on each of the topics, so one to do with sustainability and travel, and one to do specifically with airport operations, is because we wanted them to be the ones to look through the ideas, to try and understand it, to try and understand, is there potential, does it fit the criteria, is it scalable, and so on. And the Aviation X Lab Council, they were the ones to shift through all of the applications that we received and then highlight the top 10, 20 finalists that we received. Again, then they also went through an additional round of validation with the Aviation X Lab Council. Again, almost like your pitch day. So, pitching their ideas, trying to understand, what are the future thoughts for their ideas? What does development look like? What does a realistic POC look like? And then out of those validation rounds, we then selected top 2 finalists. But I just want to take that a step back. So as I mentioned, Marco, we had 2 moonshots, the carbon negative and the airport-to-air portals. The airport-to-air portals moonshot, we had to put on hold. And I leave that when we dig deep into why we did that. But we focused very specifically the last couple of months on the carbon negative moonshots. And we went ahead and selected 2 companies, again, in support with our Aviation X Lab Council, as well as the board members. They get the final say on any company that we select. So that's a little bit about the process that goes through the Aviation X Lab.
So you mentioned the council. Inside the council, there is one representative per partner, or more than one?
It's 1 representative per partner for each moonshot. So we ideally have obviously 2 council teams, one for the carbon negative, and then one for the airport-to-air portals.
And typically, what kind of background does those people have? Is people already dedicated to inside innovation, R&D, or more on the business side?
So absolutely more towards the R&D and more towards innovation. So, some of them run the, innovation projects that they have at their own partner companies. Some of them would be, subject matter experts. So, for instance, from the Emirates team, we have the environmental team, a representative from the environmental team who sits as part of the council. So it's quite a nice range of subject matter experts that we have, and it really facilitates especially now that we're launching, with the 2 companies, they're always there and they act as your in-house mentors going forward as well, which is quite important to have.
Just a different question, but if other companies in the world would be interested in joining the joint venture, is there space for other partners, or what is that a closed kind of network as set up?
So the founders group is obviously, finalized, and it's only the 5 partners, but we're always looking at different partners to explore, what kind of capacity we could partner with them. So we'd love to hear from any partners that are interested, of course.
And there are a few. Definitely the topics that you're addressing are key to that. All right, so that was the fantastic beginning, 2019, so you've probably done the first few cycles, but then COVID hit and the whole industry got totally decimated of the industry of travel and even more aviation. So what happened?
Absolutely. So as I mentioned, we started October 19 and COVID embraced us in January. And it hit the aviation industry in a way that, no one could imagine. And I say this because when COVID first hit and we were having the discussion with our leadership, and that was around January, February timeframe, the mindset was, this will probably be similar to, 9/11 or, the SARS, when, things are shaken for a couple of weeks, but, things go back to normal, and everyone had that perception, by April, May, things will be, completely back to normal. And April and May is when every single country in the world was on lockdown. And for the first time, airports closed down. Even for the UAE, that has never happened before. So the industry was shaken in a way that no one expected. And of course, we have a fantastic range of industry leaders within the Aviation X Lab board. And I recall we had a board meeting to discuss, what does that look like for the Aviation X Lab? Should we push through? Should we put the projects on hold? And of course, the airport-to-air portals, we had some fantastic ideas coming through. But at that time, the whole focus of the industry was COVID specific. And we didn't want to be unfair to the applicants that applied and bring them through, knowing that if their solution doesn't respond to COVID, there might not be a lot of interest going forward. So what the board had asked us to do is to redefine the airport-to-air portals challenge, moonshot. That's going to be coming in cycle 2. We've actually completely paused the airport-to-air portals. But alongside that, they asked us to launch a COVID-specific challenge. And the main reason was that the board wanted to instill passenger comfort. So having our board members, again, and I recall them and I'm quoting them, they would say, look, if tomorrow, let's say, Marco, you're going to be traveling tomorrow, what can we provide to you? Not only as an airline, but as an industry as a whole, that's going to make you feel comfortable, whether it's by yourself or taking your family on a flight, that you feel that the industry is doing all that it can to provide a safe and comfortable environment. And again, I think coming back from a COVID era, price is no longer going to be the thing that passengers will look for the most. It's going to be comfort, hygiene, obviously, spending less time in the airport, getting to their destination as fast and as safe as they can. So when we launched, knowing all these things, when we launched the COVID-specific challenge, and we referred to it as a traveler well-being, because it really was all around well-being and passenger comfort, it was very different than the moonshot. And I say that because we were looking for solutions that we can execute and implement today before tomorrow. So it wasn't things that we wanted to develop. It were things that were already part of the market or coming into the market that we can take on board and provide to our passengers as well. So that was really the thinking that we had launching the challenge. And we launched it in partnership with Dubai Future Foundation, again, being the backbone for innovation. And it was the first challenge that we launched, which was completely virtual. I think it ran for a total of 6 weeks. And
when was it? How long ago?
Of course, it launched end of August, starting September. And it was the first challenge where we received quite a lot of traction. I think we had over 100 applications just in those 6 weeks. And all of the applications, obviously, we also had a dedicated council for that challenge. And I want to say very proudly, the council was extremely impressed. We were quite happy to see how quickly the innovation world and the startup ecosystem, but also companies worldwide were attempting to respond, obviously, to this global pandemic, especially from a travel perspective.
What is the value proposition for the startups that you attract? Is there an equity investment? Obviously, there is a potential scaling with some of the key partners that buying the ideas and the solutions. But is there also any other commitment?
Absolutely. So the scaling was the biggest, I want to say, value proposition, just because the company that we selected, and I'll inform you a bit more about them later, they get the opportunity to work, not only with Emirates only, but they get to work with all of the 5 partners in developing their solution and launching it. And again, because we fall under the umbrella of Dubai Future Foundation, any company that becomes part of the Aviation X Lab in terms of they're part of our program, they then get quite a lot of different service offerings from, visa, the most basic things, entrepreneurship visa, from being able to come into Dubai, set up their offices, receive the, certification that's necessary. So we really facilitate a lot of future business transactions as well. For this specific one, the Traveler Wellbeing Challenge, there is no equity, just because we're looking at companies that are already there that we can go ahead and market straight away and onboard as part of our product offerings.
And I remember you were mentioning there were some fantastic stories and projects that came through that first challenge from all over the world. And so, for example, I remember the robot to sanitize the entire plane. So you want to give us a couple of stories about those projects?
Absolutely. So like I mentioned, we had quite a range of very interesting and very diverse solutions. One of the ones that we had received, one of the applications was a company from the UAE called Sanitize-experts. Yep, absolutely. And they do exactly that. They have robots that would go through spaces. So if you think about the airport, quite massive spaces, right? And the man labor required to clean the airport continuously is quite demanding from a financial perspective, from a physical perspective. But these robots, ultimately, what they can do is sanitize various areas, again, completely, there's no manual effort required. You can put them in, lounges. But what's also more interesting is that when we looked at that, we tried to understand, okay, other than the airport, where can this be deployed as well? Whether that means, hospitals, malls, restaurants, the plane itself. So the opportunities were quite endless. And in addition to their airport, they had also the UV wand, which again, let's say, you take that on board with you, whether it's the cabin crew or the passenger, and just do a quick swipe down your seat, and you have yourself a freshly sanitized seat. So this was one of the applications that we had received.
So can we go back into, so I see a quick picture here. How tall, how big is this object? Just to understand the dimensions.
Of course. So I'll just mention it in centimeters. I think if I'm not mistaken, it was around 80 to 90 centimeters.
Okay, so it's a real, robot looking, future looking, like the ones you see on movies.
Absolutely. And I believe the company were quite flexible in terms of customizing different robots depending on the needs of the client as well.
And is this a product that is already in the market or is being developed as we speak?
This is a product that's already in the market.
Fantastic. All right. How another one, the one actually I think that won eventually the challenge.
Absolutely. So the other team that I'm going to be mentioning is Nanoksi. And Nanoksi actually were the winners of the Traveler Wellbeing Challenge. And what they provide is a quite interesting solution. So it's a patented solution, actually, where it can cover any surface, any coating at all. And that surface, once exposed to light, and it can be your electrical light or your sunlight, which we have quite a lot of in Dubai, that surface becomes absolutely virus-proof, bacteria-proof, microbe-proof for up to a year. And that in itself is quite fantastic, because if you think of the airport, people are always very concerned about where they leave their passport, or what, the counter, if they're touching any counters, or, the elevators, going up to the lounge. There's quite a lot of touch points still at the airport. So our thought is to really completely eliminate any transmission risk through that. But then we want to take it a step further. When you go on board your seat, Marco, and if you recall the plane seat, which I hope hasn't been that long that you can still remember them.
Exactly a year ago, actually, when I was in your region. That was my last international trip, exactly a year ago.
Wow. Yes. 1 year ago. Right.
Yes.
We need to change that, Marco. We have a lot of...
It's about time. It's about time. Now that you have everything sanitized by robots and coated, there is no excuses.
But what that does is even, your airplane seats, and if you think about it, what you touch, the screens and so on, if you would go as a passenger knowing that all of these are sanitized, not because someone came and wiped them down, but because there's a solution that doesn't even allow any virus to sit on them, then all passengers would feel a lot more comfortable going on board the plane. And I think it would give us all a break from the hand sanitizers that I think we're all getting very tired of.
Yeah, so that's very real and very exciting in looking at solutions that have an impact to billions of people. That I think has been the driving force since the beginning. The idea of support the masses and have substantial impact. What's next? What do you expect to happen in next year and the next few years? What's the overall vision? How do you think this project can grow?
Absolutely. If you asked me this question 1 year ago, I would tell you a very different response. But I think everything with COVID has really made us understand really how substantial and how important the aviation industry is, and also how, I don't want to say sensitive, but how impacted it really got by this global pandemic. And I think that really created a mind shift, especially with our leadership, to try and understand, going forward, what is that focus area when it comes to the aviation industry, and what are future innovations that will almost make us bulletproof, I like to say, to future, not only future pandemics, but any future disturbances, right? So, when you look at the aviation industry, you already have, any weather impact can drastically impact your operations. Obviously, the political climate of the country, but these are things that are a little bit out of your control. The pandemic was the biggest example that I think, hadn't been considered in a long time. So I think going forward as the Aviation X Lab, what we really want to focus on is to ensure that the aviation industry, as much as possible, can be resilient to a lot of these external factors. And what are the different solutions and innovations that we can work towards, not only as an airline and not only, as an OEM, but as an industry as a whole, and I like to say as a community as a whole, to really ensure that the industry continues to thrive and continues to drive without, any challenges and without any obstacles as we had faced the last year.
And I think the fact that you were able to readdress your focus in such a short period of time and really putting on pause, I think, very ambitious projects to focus your energies and resources into something that has an impact today and not in the future. I think that tells really the impact and the velocity that you are able to put in the market, and I think that I commend you for that actions, and I think that gives a good sense of really what drives the whole ambitions of this fantastic project together. So, with that, Amna, I think that we look forward to see future development, and not just that, but also the success stories that you'll be able to drive through this initiative. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Hopefully we'll be able to fly to maybe using Emirates as well.
I hope we would love to have you on board.
Airlines in the world by far, and looking forward to more interesting conversation with you. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Marco. Thank you for having me.
Bye.
Thank you.